Hello, and welcome to the Blue Shadow Podcast. I'm Joey.
I'm Dan.
And today we're excited to share a little bit about our thoughts on The Bad Batch Season 3, Episode 9, The Harbinger. And we're also going to do something fun. We've mentioned before that we play Marvel Snap, the mobile card game. We're going to come up with a few cards that we'd like to see added to the game for characters that we either like or might find entertaining to be added. I'm going to start off as we usually do with our what have we been watching, reading, or playing. What have you been up to, Dan?
Basketball. A lot of basketball. And speaking of college basketball, we are in a work pool for our brackets, and I think it needs to be said that Joey's actually in first place.
It is based 30% on things that I saw on Twitter, and the rest of the 70% are purely luck. I have no knowledge of college basketball.
Seems to be working out.
Yeah, go UConn, I guess.
Yeah, they play Alabama.
I also picked that one too. That they'd play, not that Alabama would win.
You had Alabama in your Final Four.
Uh-huh. Again, total guesses. Anyway, clearly you didn't study my bracket well enough.
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't even look at it.
I didn't look at yours. I don't know who I picked beyond UConn. You might catch up to me. You never know.
I picked Houston to win. They lost.
Well, a lot of people in our pool did. Anyway, what have you been watching or playing anything, or is that about all you were up to this week?
Been about it.
Nice. I have been pretty much doing the same stuff that I have been doing the last few weeks. I am watching the X-Men animated series with my wife. We're now well into season 3. We'll be getting to X-Men 97 anytime now, probably within the month, hopefully. Been aggressively playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and we had some time off from work, and I played a full work day's worth of Final Fantasy VII. It was glorious, and I felt very relaxed. But that was a lot of what I've been playing, and also Marvel Snap. It's kind of ever present, and if we ever forget to mention it,
intermittent, it's always there.
Yeah, it's always there whether we mention it or not. I got a bunch of good variants this weekend. A lot of Dan Hip, one of my personal favorite types of variants in Marvel Snap.
I wasn't as lucky.
I also played a little more. That helps.
Maybe a little bit.
Anyway, on that note, are you prepared to talk about this episode of The Bad Batch?
Yes, episode 9 is The Harbinger. And just to remind everybody, the definition of a harbinger is somebody that prepares or announces the coming of something else or another.
And I think this is very clearly set up maybe not what is being warned of specifically, but I think there is a warning present throughout this episode. And
yes.
We usually talk about our thoughts on the meaning of the episode at the beginning. Do you want to kind of talk about it towards the end?
Yeah, I think that'll be better.
Cool. So the first portion of this episode hang on. What did you think of this episode?
Oh, it was great. I didn't get a chance to watch it on release date, so I watched it a little bit more recently today. I
knew because it was all over the official Star Wars Twitter account. I knew exactly who was going to be showing up in this episode.
But congratulations, you were right. You predicted that.
I did. I was very happy about that. It was, and again, I don't think I would have arrived at that if she wasn't in the trailer. But because she was in the trailer, that's where I was like, it would just make so much sense.
Yes.
And I do want to talk about Asajj and her motivations and everything. But it was just so nice and refreshing to see her and see her. I'm a sucker for the good guys.
She had hair. She
had a yellow lightsaber. But we'll get there. And so this episode starts, we're on Pabu. I like seeing, the Bad Batch contributing to just normal life on Pabu. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was really exciting that you could see Crosshair starting to contribute too.
Yes.
And he grunted when that person said thank you. It was quite funny.
Yes.
He's getting a lot more humanized, but he's still Crosshair.
Oh, absolutely.
It's wonderful. I mean, person to person, they're going to have their different personalities. But it was nice to see Crosshair, them not abandon that he's still a little bit of a grump. Right. Even though he's been, progressing.
Yes.
But so they were doing that, and they're Crosshair saying he wants to be more proactive about trying to figure out what's going on, and they can't trust Fennec. But as they're having this discussion, we cut to Omega playing with Batcher, which was
on the beach.
Fantastic.
That beach has played so many pivotal roles in this season so far.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, playing with Batcher is potentially the most important one.
Yes.
So,
maybe.
Up there.
Having the heart-to-heart with Crosshair is always a good one.
That too. But yes, no, super cute. And you can tell, though, unlike how we usually see Pabu, the sky is kind of overcast.
Mm-hmm.
It's gray, and I feel like it kind of set the tone for the fact that the show, or whether it's the episode or the direction of the show, things are going to start to be a little less happy-go-lucky, I think. Yeah. I feel like again, we said this, it's going to be emotional.
I think this is the beginning of the end.
I do as well,
and we'll get to that.
Yeah. So she's playing on this beach with Batcher, and Batcher starts to become a little like apprehensive, nervous, growling a little.
Yeah.
And they go into this cave, and Omega sees this spaceship.
Oh, let's not forget, they've been in that cave before too. Omega makes the line saying, Batcher, we've been in this cavern before. Mm-hmm. You know what's here. So that really, like, something was off.
Yeah.
And as you said, they find a spaceship.
And then after they see that spaceship, we see, familiar to us but new to Omega, this woman appear behind her. Who likely, I would have been scared if I was Omega.
Yeah, but it was interesting because Omega wasn't scared.
No, she's very trusting.
Mm-hmm.
And she's talking to her, and Batcher ends up leaving and getting the Bad Batch, and they see her, and she's carrying Omega out by her wrist, and she ultimately releases Omega back to them,
mm-hmm.
and she reveals to them that Fennec told them to come find her. Before we talk about the rest of what she's doing there and everything, how do we think she found her, or found them?
I don't think they are as careful as they think they are.
And she says as much, for sure.
Yes.
And I think that could come to not work in their favor in the future.
I mean, they're building this reputation among the certain class of people, the bounty hunters, the mercenaries, they always go somewhere afterwards. They fly in the same ship. They wear the same clothes. They're very identifiable. I mean, we saw they're just physically, their stature is a lot larger than the average person. So it's like trying to blend in wearing a clown suit.
And Fennec knew exactly who they were when she saw them, and she'd only interacted with them one time.
Yes.
So I imagine the Empire, who's actively looking for them, may have more of a concept of where they are than...
And who knows that everything about them, from what they're supposed to be, what they're good at, what they're not good at.
Mm-hmm. So, she says Fennec told them to find them, and she mentions that she knows they're interested in M counts, and Asajj asks why they're interested, and it again leads to another endearing Omega moment. Yes. What did you think of Omega saying it was for a friend?
I think it was Omega growing up a little bit and realizing that we can't just tell everybody our secret, but we know how long that lasts.
Though I wholeheartedly believe Asajj knew exactly what was happening the whole time.
I think
the entire
what
time.
We know about Asajj, I mean, just from the Clone Wars alone, we know she's pretty smart, pretty aware of everything going on around her.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think Omega is as cunning as she thinks she is.
Not yet. She's getting there, but no, definitely not. And here we finally get to them saying the word. I couldn't believe they said the word.
The water in Pawnee, midichlorians.
The midichlorians. I was, M Count has been lurking since The Mandalorian,
mm-hmm.
and I didn't know if they were actually going to say it. So it was nice to hear her say midichlorian, and this comes after Omega kind of breaks and ultimately says, the Empire's looking for her because of these mysterious experiments.
Mm-hmm.
And Asajj kind of says it's the midichlorians or something that lives in the blood of all living things, and we get into the whole Force discussion of those with a high M Count are more capable or more naturally inclined to wield the Force.
And I think that was one of the more clear explanations of M Count we've seen.
Arguably the most clear, I feel like.
Just throughout everything.
Even in terms of the whole saga of Star Wars.
We knew Anakin had this elevated M Count, but they never really said what it was, right? In episode...
Wait, this was midichlorian. They just straight up said he has the highest midichlorian count or something like that. Or as high as Yoda's or something.
Something.
And they didn't really...
explain what it was. They just said that he has a number. It's pretty high. We should be...
And I think this is like a nice way of merging the more like that interesting, cool concept from the prequels with practicality of like how does it actually affect the story. And so they kind of get into that, and Hunter asks if this is connected to the Jedi, and Omega excitedly asks if she's a Jedi, and basically Asajj continues to say like we can like do some tests, but like,
and I think it was important too that Asajj says no. I mean, that was her first answer.
That was her first answer.
Was no. Jedi are a certain subset of Force users with, I mean, and she of all people would know.
Mm-hmm. Being one herself.
From being on both sides of that coin. She knows exactly what a Jedi is. But yeah, like you said, offered to do some tests for Omega to see if she does have an elevated M count.
And I thought this was the first crack of seeing, like, obviously Clone Wars Ventures probably would have just killed them all. So the first true bit of seeing like the personality that's growing within her come back is her being like, okay, well let's do some tests or whatever. Mm-hmm. I thought it was really exciting to see. As I've mentioned, I love the Jedi, I love the good guys. So seeing such a cool character kind of swing begrudgingly, even more so than Crosshair, I think, begrudgingly towards being kind of a good guy. Mm-hmm. It's exciting. And before we start talking about Asajj's tests, do you have any? I know you haven't read Dark Disciple. I haven't read Dark Disciple, but we talked last week about the story and what happened.
Yes.
They give us, ultimately in this episode, very, very little, and we can talk about the exact quote at the end, but do you feel like what do you think about Asajj coming to light side, whether you did or didn't know about this story?
I'm not going to go as far as to say she's come back to the light.
I think she has.
I
mean, when we'll talk about her interaction with animals, her interaction with the Bad Batch. I don't think she's a Jedi. I think she's certainly on the light side.
Yes. Yeah, she definitely is not on the dark side. I would.
We'll call her good guy Ventress or neutral guy Ventress.
Yeah, I'd say she's pretty neutral at the moment.
What do you think? Like, let's say someone didn't know about Dark Disciple. What do you think? Like, I almost feel like it would have added more of a suspense. Like, what is she doing? Why is her lightsaber yellow? Why is she kind of being nice to them? What is happening here?
And I think we kind of saw in the Clone Wars, was it season 5, with the Trials of Ahsoka? Even then, Ventress had this attitude about her of, well, I mean, her and Ahsoka were enemies the entire time. But even she told Anakin, like, you are screwing her up. Like, this is your fault. Mm-hmm. And so I think I'd go as far as to say there was the first time we really saw her shift her personality.
Like the crack in the armor kind
of. If she could have got the jump on Anakin, she would have. And early Asajj would have.
Yes, definitely.
But with some character growth, I mean, and we know that she was cast aside by Dooku and that whole not so fun story for her. Mm-hmm. So she knows firsthand what it's like to be abandoned. Yeah. And I think that really spurred her towards the light.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that is very logical that this is where she'd end up. Mm-hmm. I think the surprise is having her here, and we'll talk more about like how she might have come back and like some stuff that people have said about her coming back and everything. But so we get to these tests. Omega, it starts out by Omega balancing a rock on her head. And did you notice that every time Omega would drop the rock, Asajj would just very casually, as if she knew where it was going to be, catch it.
Not even looking.
Not even. And I think that goes to highlight, like, the type, like, I think she was sneakily trying to say, like, to Omega, this is what you should be able to, like.
And I think it's important, too. She didn't, at this point, nobody knew who she was. Mm-hmm. She didn't use the Force. I mean, that, you could argue, was the first sign of it. Because, I mean, there was a part where she was talking to the Bad Batch, and she just kind of sticks her arm out behind her and catches it. Mm-hmm. Didn't even look. But, yeah, at this point, they didn't know who she was. I mean, as we'll see, they had their suspicions.
And you can tell that they were not having, the Crosshair, Hunter, and Wrecker were not having an ounce of this. They were definitely suspicious, probably just because it was someone that found them without any information from them. And we see them at, like, a protective dad at like softball practice, standing there watching them. And that's where we get our Tech Watch episode of the week because his name was brought up yet again.
It was
an important character who we have no evidence to say whether he is or is not alive.
Correct.
This week.
And this week, I don't think we get any closer to the answer.
No, we haven't seen that.
We were told
Dark Clone Trooper in a while.
We were told that. I'm just gonna ignore that.
Okay, it's fine.
Because that's not tech.
Don't make me bring up the buttons again.
Oh my goodness, I'm tech.
You can't see it, but Dan is pressing his arm as if he has the tech buttons. Anyway,
yes.
That aside, they mention that they were looking through Tech's database or databank, and they're like, "Yep, it's her. It's Asajj Ventress."
Yes.
So that they were not thrilled by that, given that their knowledge of her from the Clone Wars.
And Asajj picks up on that. You could tell she knows right away once they figure out who she is.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, she sends Omega off on a little side quest go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was saying, to have this conversation that she knew she'd have to have at some point.
I wholeheartedly don't believe that was part of Omega's initial test.
Yeah.
I think it could have been, but I think she was like, all right.
Also, I thought it was interesting that Ventress knew exactly what was up there.
Uh-huh.
She knew that there was this tree all the way at the top.
Do you think she saw when she was flying in? Or do you think she was lurking?
I think she lurked in, because if you're the Bad Batch, you would realize if a new ship came and flew overhead of Pabu.
Yeah, it wouldn't have flown overhead.
Yeah.
She hid in the cave and probably patrolled.
Yeah, and waited.
And she, before we talk about that, we can say Omega failed her first test.
Yes.
For sure. And when Omega asked if Asajj was a Jedi, she was like, no, but I know they're Jedi. But basically, watch the Clone Wars, Omega. But she did that. She failed the test. Then she sends Omega up.
Mm-hmm. And
let's talk about the discussion that occurs while Omega runs up, and then we can come back to Omega.
Yes.
But we get there. We have the beaches there, the sun setting, and we see Ventress essentially start to fight the Bad Batch in hand-to-hand combat because they essentially say, "We know who you are."
Yes.
And I don't think that, as much as us, the audience knows that she's now at least being helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, stop. But every ounce of evidence they have says, please don't let her anywhere near Omega.
Yes. And also, they've never seen Ventress before, have they?
Not to our knowledge.
And they've also never seen a Force user fight a human. Other than when the clones turned on Depa Billaba
yeah.
in the beginning of the Bad Batch. They really had no idea what they were up against. And I thought that was so funny.
And you can tell she was not trying.
Yeah. And
like, I think this is again showing her growth. You can tell her instinct is, I want to cut their heads off with my lightsaber.
Yeah.
But she is like,
she had ample opportunity to.
And it goes to show you, she does not want to.
And I thought it was interesting that the Bad Batch, for one of the first times, did not use stuns.
No, I think they know how dangerous Asajj could be or could have been if she's like what she was. So they get into this fight, and they kind of...
Sweet fight.
It is. It's very nice. The Force hand-to-hand combat is always exciting. I think we're starting to see more of it.
And I think we're going to see some of that in the Acolyte, too,
the Acolyte,
just based on the trailer.
Ezra and Ahsoka, and this was wonderful, but they ultimately fight, and Hunter asks if she wants to take her, kind of, and I think this all comes back to this anxiety with Hunter and to a certain extent all of the Bad Batch of wanting to keep Omega protected and safe.
Right.
And I think we've been toying all season with the idea of is it overprotection or is it protection? And I think this is a case where it's they all kind of know, at least at this point, if she takes her, it could be for something bad, or when we get to the end of the episode, ultimately, if she takes her, it wouldn't be bad, but they'd still have to essentially lose Omega.
Right.
And I think this fight was kind of about that metaphorically as much as it was about punching each other. And I like the line where Ventress asked them to stand down and kind of insulted them a little bit about being clones, and they got to bring up the great following orders line that the show has been bringing up a lot.
And I thought it was interesting too. Ventress says, "Why don't you put those down and fight fair?"
Mm-hmm.
After she took it from them.
Yeah.
And they've had, again, no experience with anything like that ever happening before.
No, certainly not against them. I'm certain they were definitely terrified. And we see the yellow lightsaber, and it does appear that it's her. Like
Her
the
hilt,
hilt is like her hilt.
One of them.
Do we believe there's another one? I feel like if there was another one, we'd have seen it.
I don't think so.
You think she's hiding it?
She didn't need it.
But it wasn't on her hip.
But she didn't need it.
She had a blaster on the other hip, which I thought was
I
exciting.
think that would draw attention to her.
More than just one?
You could argue that you found one or you bought one off the black market.
But having two matching lightsabers might tip you off. I see. That's fair.
But going back to having the blaster on the hip and lightsaber on one, very kind of old westy feel to me.
Yeah, no, I love the blaster lightsaber combo. Like Kanan always.
And Cal Kestis, if you get that far.
Yes, Dan. That's the whole second game. That's not just the first game.
I know.
Dan needs to play those games. They're fantastic. Anyway, we can kind of bounce back to Omega at this point. She's running up the mountain, and you can, I guess, further clarifying the test is to go back and get this white flower from a tree at the very top of Pabu's mountain, and get back before the sunset.
Right.
And I think this is an example of talking about the end before we talk about the details. I think she passed this test not just because of she was able to deliver the flower back, but because she was able to use her connection to animals, which is ultimately something that Ventress next test is. I think she kind of shadow passes both tests at once with this one.
Yes, unintentionally.
As she gets halfway up, she sees Batcher and asks for her help.
It's like when you get the right answer on a math test using the wrong formula. That's what Omega did.
And it was like she passed the next test, but we will talk about that in a second. But so Omega ultimately gets up there with Batcher's help, comes back down, and what she finds made me think of the meme of Donald Glover walking back with the pizzas and the whole house is on fire, where she's got, what does she have? Wrecker up in a force choke.
Wrecker in a force choke, Crosshair knocked out, and Hunter pinned down with the lightsaber to his throat.
Kind of entertaining, because you she could have ended that very easily, and I think at that point.
This, not to get too philosophical, this is a metaphor for just who the Bad Batch is. They're a little arrogant as a group.
And I feel like this season they've been showing that a little more. And I don't know if it's Hunter specifically leading them into that, or if it's I don't know.
Because, again, Ventress was this mythical person to them who we know that they knew about. All of the clones knew about Ventress.
And they know better than to mess with someone with a lightsaber in the first place.
Right.
At least without being incredibly careful and calculated, which this was not calculated. They just kind of ran at her.
Yeah.
Which is honestly not quite their speed usually. I feel like they usually have some sort of plan. They're not thinking with their heads, I feel like.
And just to go back a little bit, that's where they all start shooting at her and she just kind of dodges it without even bringing out the light. That was so cool.
Yeah, no, it was everything about that fight was so nice.
If I were them, at that point I'd be like, nope. We're
just gonna stop.
You're good.
But ultimately, Omega comes back, finds him in this thing. They tell her who Ventress is. Ventress says that the times have changed for both of them, and I don't think that worked necessarily as well as it should have for them. They said they have as Ventress essentially said they have a common enemy, which they do.
Yeah.
The same entity wronged both of them in a very similar way.
Right.
Essentially throwing them out in favor of what ultimately is the Empire. Ventress kind of then gives them the indication that even though they were both pawns in the Clone Wars, she knows a lot about the Empire and knows that they're far more dangerous than they can imagine.
Yes.
And that she is not their enemy.
Right. And again, I think that goes back to their arrogance. That, we can outrun the Empire, and she's basically telling them, you are playing basketball against Michael Jordan and you're still in high school and you don't realize it.
And you got to think based on that she obviously knows about Palpatine from the Clone Wars. The way she says that makes you feel like she might know that this, whether it's Palpatine or not, she knows the Sith or something is in charge of the Empire in a way that would make it super dangerous. Yeah. Especially with the looming threat of the whole M count thing behind it. And if she does know it's the Emperor, and knows that Omega is an M count target, it's probably like extra setting off alarms in her head of like this.
Yeah,
he's gonna be coming for this, which could be coming for this, which could be really bad. But that night, Hunter and Omega are sitting in the ship. Crosshair's also there. I believe Wrecker's as
all
well.
three of them are there.
All three of them
or
are
Wrecker's at the door.
Yeah, so they're all in the Marauder, and Omega is talking to Hunter, and he's telling Omega that she can't trust Ventress. No one can trust Ventress. She's done horrible things. And where we get to, I think, an example of when Omega's optimism is correct, and she's able to use her previous experiences to inform her current ones. And she points directly at Crosshair and says, I never gave up hope in you, so why should I in her?
Yeah, Crosshair says something to her first.
He uses the word naive.
Yes.
Which is something that we've talked about, I feel like, several times.
One of the themes. Is like you said, is she naive, or is she more of a realist than we give her credit for? And
I think, as we've said, at the beginning, I think it was genuinely naive. Mm-hmm. But I think we've moved towards like informed optimism, maybe.
A little bit, yeah.
And I think this is like really highlighting that she knows, I think Omega knows that Ventress could have killed them all if she really wanted to. Or she could have taken Omega and turned her into the Empire. I think she knows that she's actually trying to help her.
Right. And I think they all know it too, with the guidance of Omega.
Because Hunter wouldn't have even let her go anywhere near her again if he didn't, at least some part of him believed what Omega was saying.
Right. Because again, if Ventress wanted to, she could have killed them all before they even realized what was happening.
Mm-hmm. Without a doubt. And so they have this discussion. Crosshair gets a little roasted because he's being hypocritical. And Omega says, like, we need to trust her. So Omega and Batcher ultimately are walking up to this pier where they find Ventress, who is surprised. She refers to the Bad Batch as Omega Shadows, I believe, right?
I think so.
Basically saying that they don't give her any freedom. And she basically says, okay, we'll do the third test. This also kind of reminded me of The Last Jedi a little bit, with like Luke's lessons. Mm-hmm. Like slightly reluctant, kind of moody.
Yeah.
I thought that was a fun connection too. But Ventress gets this boat. They go out into the water on Pabu, and they're pretty far out. And Omega starts asking a bunch of questions. Why are they out there? Mm-hmm. And then she starts to explain the connection to nature.
Right.
As she's doing that, I do want to say one of the funniest things is when she can sense them watching her, and she looks right at him. It's so funny.
Yeah.
I think they've used Ventress and her kind of moodiness and scariness so well. Like, they really made the best of having that character in the show, I feel like.
Yes.
And that little detail was something that I felt was really nice. But ultimately, Ventress says to Omega, reach out and connect to the living things around you. Mm-hmm. And as people do when they start to try and use the Force for the first time, Omega struggles.
And gets very frustrated.
Almost like no patience. But she did not try very long. She did not try many times.
And I think that goes back to the first test of why she failed it. Mm-hmm. She was being too literal about it. Well, it's slippery. What do you want me to do? Mm-hmm. And she tries it, didn't work, and gets a little indignant about it and goes, it's not like you could do it.
Little does she know. And I think it does connect to the Force being like a visualization thing. Like if you can imagine doing it in your mind, mm-hmm. you can do it.
Yes.
And I think that's... Omega could not envision it. She didn't really know what she was trying to do. Mm-hmm. And she's being impatient. And then got a little snippy, which led to...
Yes, Ventress being able to do it and summon the circling fish.
I thought it was so pretty.
I just want to make one comment. Mm-hmm. Omega came up and saw Ventress force choking Wrecker and didn't think that she could do it. I mean, Wrecker was the biggest person Omega's ever seen and the strongest. And she saw him floating in the air.
Not just Wrecker floating in the air, but Hunter and Crosshair out of commission. Wrecker's floating in the air. She's got a lightsaber. And there might be
even do it.
There might be the naive portion of Omega coming out. But Ventress reaches out. We have the nice, cool, glowing, bioluminescent fishies. And then we start to, in typical Bad Batch fashion, the boat starts to shake. The water starts to shake. And then we see something we haven't seen in Bad Batch in a little bit, a giant monster. I always like the giant monsters.
It's good. I feel like this won't be the last one we've seen.
Oh, definitely not.
Maybe we'll see the Zilla Beast.
Possibly, and Tantus. That would be kind of exciting. We could talk about the Zilla Beast for a whole 2 episodes, probably.
We might. We don't know.
Yeah,
we don't know what we're going to...
That is very true. But I like that the monsters are always used as like a... We talked about this on the episode where they went to the outpost. The monsters are used as like a metaphor for the struggles that they're having. Mm-hmm. So we see this monster. It's this giant, would you say like a kraken type?
I'm saying kraken. It had tentacles. It's a sea monster.
I do have the name here. It's called a Varathian. We can call it the space kraken.
Kraken. It's Kraken.
So
it's probably trademark. They can't use Kraken.
So they see the Kraken. The Bad Batch sees the Kraken as they're watching, creeping on Omega and Ventress. And Ventress tells Omega she wasn't planning on trying to summon that. But when she kind of put out her little force call, I think it responded. And Ventress starts doing these cool little moves to try and fight it and get it away. Mm-hmm. And it ultimately ends with the Bad Batch coming in and, trying to shoot at the monster.
Right.
And she says, no, this is making it worse. My first instinct was that she was going to go kill it.
I thought so too. And she, at this point, already sliced one of its tentacles after it took Omega.
Mm-hmm. And I think just seeing her care enough to go after Omega is another one of these signs that I've been kind of trying to call out as we've been going through, is like, she does care.
Yeah. And
it speaks to not only Omega and how every person she meets seems to fall in love with her in some capacity, but also Ventress's growth.
Do you think Ventress sees herself in Omega?
I think a little.
And that's why she's...
I feel like that kind of is the theme. Is like, for some reason, they kind of see a little bit of themselves, these people. Like Fennec, I feel like, had a very similar experience. Mm-hmm. Sees herself in Omega, and that's why she wants to help so much. But I do want to point out something, and it's going to kind of tie into the resolution of this action sequence, but on her little pauldron on her shoulder, you see there was like a black snake. Mm-hmm. This is not something, again, I haven't read Dark Disciple, but Star Wars Explained, all credit to him for pointing this out, but it's a black snake, and in the book Dark Disciple, I mentioned last week that Ventress had to teach Quinlan Vos how to use the dark side. Mm-hmm. And one of the lessons was that she had to like tame these animals and get them to trust them with the Force and then kill them. Mm-hmm. Which you can see this is a strong parallel to that.
Yeah.
In the exact opposite direction. So I maybe she wears that on her shoulder as like a sign of like moving past it. Mm-hmm. And she gets to this point where the Omega is kind of safe on the boat that's been overturned, and Asajj is wrapped up in the tentacles moving towards the animal. And you can kind of now have this beautiful shot of like the giant kraken pulling Asajj in, and you see its eye, and you see, Asajj trying to, with the Force, stop it, and then you see its eye start to loosen up. And I think it just goes, again, to show how far Ventress has come with the connection to nature. She really is tapping into the light side.
Yes.
So much, which I think is like, and as we were talking about earlier, it kind of like, we hadn't gotten to the point of knowing quite how far she went to the light. Mm-hmm. You said we don't really know. Now I think this is kind of pushing it a little more in that direction.
And this whole scene reminded me of Ezra.
Oh, yes.
That honestly, that was my first thought was, cool, we're getting more.
Yeah. I love the animal connection. Mm-hmm. Not only because I think it's something that you can experience in real life, but something that, like, it shows, like, I think the dark side's often romanticized. My wife loves all the bad guys, so she's going to be mad at me for saying this. But, like, I think it's easy to say, like, oh, the Force lightning and the Force choking, it's so powerful and so cool. But I think this is the kind of stuff that, like, we talk about the lessons of Star Wars. Mm-hmm. And, like, this is an example of a lesson from Star Wars. And coming from Ventress, it's just so unexpected for me.
Yes.
So she ultimately is able to like communicate with the Kraken sea monster thing, Varathian, if you will, and convinces it to kind of leave. They get picked up on the Marauder, and Omega says it's fun. She's crazy.
She is.
I love Omega so much. So we ultimately get back to the cove where the episode started, and we see the Bad Batch, meaning Hunter, Wrecker, Crosshair, Omega, and Batcher, along with Ventress. And Ventress ultimately says that Omega does not have a high M count.
Right.
And we see Omega kind of like confused, maybe a little upset. Like I think Omega may have been hoping that this would, whether she had the Force or not, like at least be an answer and give them some sort of forward progress. They then, Wrecker's like, let's go get some food. So they walk away, and Omega, like, thanks Ventress, which again is such, like, seeing these two characters interact, I never would have, like, picked these. It's like a fan fiction-ish combination of characters, but it's so good. I love seeing them interact. But Crosshair says to Ventress, she's lying.
Yes.
And Ventress throws back a little, which part is she lying about? Is it that she doesn't have a high M count, or is it that she doesn't have potential to Force user? What do you think that Ventress is lying? First of all, do you think she's lying?
Yes,
Second,
I absolutely think she's lying.
I wholeheartedly agree.
I believe she was lying about Omega's M count.
And to an extent, we know that that's true.
I mean, the test literally showed
the yellow light and like the spinny
that she has a high
clock
M
of
count.
anxiety.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think Ventress was hoping to be able to lie to them.
Mm-hmm.
Especially Omega.
I think she was thoroughly hoping that she would not even have a high M count or have any aptitude.
Mm.
When do you think Ventress knew? Because she's not very clear about the tests and the beginning and end, maybe the beginnings, but not the ends of the tests and how she's done each time.
I don't know.
Do you think it was... I think it's possible that when she sees her riding on Batcher, because she sees that, right? That's how she comes back?
Yes.
Maybe that could show something.
Maybe, yeah.
But yeah, I don't necessarily know when she made the decision. I don't know if we're meant to.
Yeah, I think ambiguity was their best friend here, and we're going to talk about that ambiguity in a second.
Yeah, so they basically say if she did have an AM count, she'd have to leave, which gets us back to that concept of like protection over protection. And do you think if like another hypothetical, what do you think would happen if she was like, yeah, she has an AM count, Omega, you have an AM count? Do you think she'd take her? And this is where I get into my theory-ish area where in Obi-Wan we knew that Quinlan Vos went through the hidden path. We don't necessarily know at this point that Quinlan and Asajj are connected, but if they are both in fact alive, it would make sense that they were together based on the story of Dark Disciple. So could Omega then be funneled through the path and like be protected by this network?
Yes, assuming Ventress would take her.
And it seems like she might, but I don't think she would take the Bad Batch.
Oh, absolutely not.
I don't think she likes them very much.
I think she views them as a hindrance to everything.
And she says as much on the boat. I don't think we mentioned that. Like, she says, how could you... It's a wonder you could make any progress with them lurking over you. Did she call them, I think, the Shadow? We talked about that. So, yeah. Hey, kind of the name of the podcast a little bit.
But, yeah. No, that's... I don't think she would take the Bad Batch at all.
No. I think she would revel in leaving them.
I think she'd sooner kill them.
It's possible.
If given the option. And
maybe back in the olden days.
So that brings us to the meat of the episode, in my opinion.
What is being harbinged?
Yes. As their Ventress is leaving, she kind of tells them, you have no idea what you're up against.
And it's the second warning that she's given them about this.
And she's like, I was able to find you. You're not safe here. You're not as safe as you think you are. They're going to come for her. And you don't understand what that means at all. And
before we talk about the warning for the future and what that could mean, I want to say, as she's leaving, she says, I am not the Empire. Again, highlighting, she's not the Empire.
Yeah.
She's not, like, going to tell them she's not the Empire. And she says she has a few lives left. Before we talk about what could be coming next, I'm going to talk about how that's essentially the only line or any reference that we get to her potentially having died before. I don't think she needed to bring it up in this episode the way that it's structured. I don't think it made any sense to.
I think they did it so all the people who read Dark Disciple didn't riot.
It's true. But they also have to have a reason for bringing her back beyond this. Because I would say this episode itself isn't necessarily justification for bringing that character back.
They could have brought back
Quinlan Vos.
Yeah.
or something like
somebody that we know is alive.
So why in that case do you think it was Asajj?
Well, I think Asajj is a bounty hunter. She even says so, because Crosshair asks her, "Whose side are you on?" as she's walking away, and without turning back, she says, "My own."
Yes.
So
go ahead.
I think she's out for herself at the moment.
I really am all in on this hidden path connection. Mm-hmm. And if she is in fact with the hidden path, she would not want to be running around talking about it, for sure. So whether it is for herself or whether it is for that.
But she has to be doing some sort of bounty hunting.
Yes.
Otherwise...
So could she be taking these M count targets and hiding them?
It's a good theory.
Because why if she was just truly being a bounty hunter, why would she not have just taken Omega the Empire?
Right.
That's kind of like the logic kind of funnels you into thinking these things. And again, they can veer however they want. Yeah. But I also don't think, again, before we jump to the end and what could be coming, do you think this is the last Adventures we've seen?
No.
First in the Bad Batch?
No.
I don't think it is either.
I think we are going to see her. This is my want. Call it a Dan theory, call it whatever you want. I want to see her interact with Rex and Echo.
That would be crazy. And if we think about, there's been a lot of connections to the way that they've ran Rebels to this show. And the end of Rebels is kind of like rallying all of the troops from a lot of their previous adventures. Like Hondo came back. Some of the other, like the younger character pilots came back. And it was this whole like reunion kind of in support of Ezra. Mm-hmm. And I think you could see something like this for Omega. Yeah. And I think that would be awesome.
Could you imagine just putting yourself in their shoes? They've seen her, right? Because, they were with Anakin. And
they know exactly who that is.
They know better than anybody who she is and what she's
Rex
capable.
might try to shoot her right away. I don't think it would work, but... No, I think that's an interesting concept. And then the last thing about Asajj I want to bring up is I believe it was the voice actor. I think her name's Nika Fetterman. I could be completely wrong. So. But she mentioned recently that this is not the last time you'll see Asajj, and look for more about how she survived in future storytelling. Mm-hmm. Do you think... And I think the fact that the voice actor said it means there's something to it. This brings me to two questions. First, do you think it's Tales of the Jedi? And she could get her own little 3 series of episodes.
I hope so. I want to see what happens.
I think it would be cool if like you had a time when she was in the Jedi Order focused episode, maybe like how she was resurrected, and then what she's doing kind of in the time of the Bad Batch. I think that could be really interesting.
Yes, and I think a lot of people would enjoy that.
I love the format of Tales of the Jedi. Obviously, Dan is a Count Dooku fanboy.
That's a little extreme, but I like the character. Yeah,
he's a wonderful character. But he, I
hear he was a visionary.
Some say, Doc Brown. But that was a great way to tell a complex story. I would have loved to see a whole show on it.
And you could.
And you could on Asajj as well. But that was a great way to showcase these different points in his life. And I think it could be for Asajj. The next question is, what is the next... And we will ultimately get back to the Bad Batch, but what is the next animated show after the Bad Batch? Are we staying in this kind of era, or do we have a Asajj Hidden Path kind of show following what Asajj and some other characters are doing?
That I have no idea.
Do you think it's possible that she could have been brought back to kind of set up her return in another show?
There's a chance. I think this could be even just a little test to see, is she well received?
I would say from what I've seen so far, yes, which is exciting. But yeah, no, it could have been a test. And it could be like, I have lots of other animated shows we'd like to see next. And I don't want to talk about that now because we can make a whole episode of that after Bad Batch is over. But
at this point in time, there are so many directions they could go if they wanted to. Mm-hmm. We could get an Asajj show. We could get a First Order show.
See, before I get too excited.
Okay, I'll stop. So let's pivot back to the Bad Batch.
Look forward to hearing us discuss this after the Bad Batch. It can be one of our first non-review based episodes that we do.
Yes. So,
Luke Skywalker Ben Solo show. Anyway, Luke, no, no Luke's one you only.
So going back to the Bad Batch, Harbinger. What's next? Who is what was she preceding? Asajj, that is.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I think it's pretty clear. She was the Harbinger.
Yes.
In the said...
Far clearer than it usually is with these episode titles.
Yes. So
I think if I read you the next 2 episodes, so next week we have 2 episodes, the next set, and this would be season 3, episodes 10 and 11. The first is called Identity Crisis, and the second is called Point of No Return. I think all of this is, much like this episode was Overcast, kind of the calm before the storm. I think this episode is, in fact, that.
Yes, it will be the storm.
Point of No Return certainly sounds like the storm.
In typical Star Wars fashion, I hope we get the Imperial ships, whatever we get, jumping out of hyperspace. Just, that would be so cool.
And ruining poor Pabu. It is, I don't necessarily believe trailers or spoilers, but there is a shot in the trailer of Pabu looking not so great, a little on fire probably.
Mm.
I think we might be seeing whatever episode that is this coming.
I agree. I think we are nearing the end of Pabu.
Do we think Omega is going to get captured?
No.
You don't think?
Not yet.
I wonder if, like, for me, I think the end could potentially be, maybe not yet, but I think the end could be Omega captured and the Bad Batch, Rex. Like, that could be, like, the call to action that really gets the Bad Batch into, like, getting to Tantus.
Could we see Omega give herself up?
Yeah, 100%.
And let's say they pin them down, Pabu's in flames, crumbling, and she just says, "I'll do it," and voluntarily goes.
And Hunter would probably be losing his mind, as he should.
If he's alive.
Or conscious. Dark Dan over here. Well, I think
there needs to be balance.
I don't know about that with this. I don't want to be sad. I think we will be sad. But that brings us to, like, the threads that are kind of left. We have everything with Tantus. We have the clone, the CX dark clone, kind of. I think it's all kind of pointing to that. And we don't really have many episodes left.
No, and we have to still resolve what happens to Wolf.
And I think that can easily be kind of woven into this direction.
Will we see Cody again?
I don't know.
Is he just dead?
Gone? I don't think he's dead. Because, he kind of left on his own accord, and Rampart didn't really seem to care. Mm-hmm. Another rogue clone, kind of. But I think it could be something where he, like, next time we see Rex, he could be with him. Or Rex could know where he is.
That'd be cool.
I know. But I don't think he needs to be there. But I think it would be nice to see. Especially as this series has kind of been, like, the conclusion of the clone's story. I think it would certainly be an appropriate place for them. And then it would leave us with, well, where's Cody? For after this, which they might want to do. But
yeah. Could be an animated show.
Could be an animated show. But so yeah, that's kind of what's left. I feel like it's all the Empire stuff to really bring the rest of the show home. I'm very excited. I really enjoyed this episode. I'm always a sucker for anything that has to do with the Force, and the show has not had much of it. So this was a really special episode for me.
Do we think we will see Omega use the Force by the end of the series?
I don't want
That wasn't the answer I was expecting. I was expecting a yes. Why not?
A quote that Dan often throws around when we discuss Star Wars is, "Not everybody needs to use the Force." And this
make me sound like I'm such a Debbie Downer.
This comes in the context of typically Sabine, I think, is the... I think while Omega has more set up to be Force sensitive than Sabine did in Rebels, though there are some hints. We can talk about that later if you want. I think it... I always ask with Star Wars, why? What's to be gained from doing that? I don't know. I don't have an answer for what would be gained for Omega being able to use the Force, story-wise.
I don't know.
So I personally don't want to see that, but I think I'm going to eat my words in, like, probably 2 or 3 weeks when she uses the Force, because I think they're kind of leaning in that direction. It seems to be what they're trying to do.
Yes, and I think we kind of knew that Omega's different, and she seems to have the qualities of all of them combined.
We've asked, and I at least I've wondered this from the whole show. What is her enhancement?
Is it everything? And then did they give her a high M count, or was that just a mutation?
And, like, I remember the theory. Like, this is Omega Force sensitive? It's like a theory as old as the show.
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing this theory where, like, why is Omega's hair white? Whether did Palpatine commission them to make a Palpatine clone, and was she like an experiment with that? That's a really old theory that's been around as long as the character has. So, like, is that something we're ultimately working toward? Do we see the Emperor again?
Yes.
Oh, I hope so.
Come on, we're going to see the Emperor at least 2 more times.
Do we see Exegol?
No.
Oh.
I don't think.
I think it could be like a cool post-credit scene if, like, they blow up Tantus or something, and he lost his cloning when they blow up Tantus.
Maybe we'll see Moff Gideon.
Any Giancarlo Esposito is good Giancarlo Esposito. But yeah, no. Do we see Omega using the Force? I think they're really leaning towards it. You didn't really give us your emotional thoughts about it. You give us the facts. What do you feel about it, Dan?
I feel like we're going to see Omega somehow use the Force. Somehow Omega can use the Force. Now, I think she's going to connect with an animal.
Like a special, like the Zillabeast kind of animal?
That would be sweet.
Yeah.
Something. I don't think we're going to see her Force push or take somebody's blaster out of their hand.
And see, you're winning me over to this idea already. Captain, not everybody needs to use the Force. I think you might also say not everybody needs to be a Jedi. And I think that is what I would like. If she could use her connection to the Force and her connection to other living things.
That's just it. I don't want to see her with a lightsaber. I don't want to see her with Force lightning, which would be pretty sweet if she was a Palpatine.
Everyone's a Palpatine.
Could you imagine Omega just Force lightning somebody?
Hunter would faint.
Unless she did it to him.
True. I know that. Listen, everyone's a Palpatine these days. I'm just kidding. I love Rey. As we say this, I love Rey. I'm just making fun of people who are unnecessarily negative. Anyway, we talked about next week. We talked about where we think it's leading. Anything else you have to add about the Bad Batch?
No, I think we pretty much hit all the nails on the head.
I loved this episode. I thought it was so great. And I'm looking forward to it. I feel like it's going to break my heart.
It's good. It should.
I'm going to get a box of Kleenex for the next few weeks, and we'll see what happens.
I'm not. I'm going to take it on the chin. Internalize.
Yeah, I'm what you call a watching crier. And so is my wife. We watched, again, we've talked about Rebels a lot, and spoilers if you haven't watched Rebels, but when we rewatched it before Ahsoka, the Kanan episode where he ends up sacrificing himself, we were a mess. We were both bawling, like full-on ugly crying.
You even knew it was that's even worse because you could prepare for it.
No, this is my third time watching Rebels fully, and this is her second. We were a disaster. It doesn't get easier. I think, in fact, it gets harder. So hopefully...
Yeah, you know what's coming.
Hopefully they don't make this show that painful for me.
One can only wait.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that brings us to our next segment. You know, we always like to make our little second segment something fun and exciting. We've mentioned that we both play Marvel Snap. I've been playing for about a year and a half or so, maybe a little less. I think you were started around the same time, right? Maybe a little after? Yeah. Probably a few months after?
A few months, because you were destroying me in the beginning with cards that I'd never seen.
It's kind of fun. But we love this game. If you haven't tried it, it's free, and I would say 99% of the time it's not pay to win. It's actually
especially
fair.
in the beginning.
Yeah, it's very fair in terms of card acquisitions and, you know, getting new cards. It's a card-based Marvel game. Mm-hmm. And with that in mind, each card, the way the game works is there are 3 locations. They vary. What the location does varies by game, and they have a whole pool of them that they put together. And you get to play this game that consists of 6 turns. Each card has an energy and a power, and ultimately whoever has the highest power wins a location, and whoever wins 2 of the 3 locations, or 3 locations wins. Yep. So there are a lot of really fun and innovative cards, and we wanted to talk about characters that we'd like to see, and they have a lot of really obscure characters.
And just to preface this, it is not just MCU. They really run the gauntlet of people who are only mentioned one time in the comics.
Like we were watching X-Men the animated series like I'm talking about, and I've been showing my wife, oh look, this card. She's like, they really got them all, don't they? Like these obscure characters. Gladiator was just in the episodes we've been watching, you know, with his giant mohawk,
it's pretty cool.
Purple skin. No, it's ridiculous. It's insane. So I pulled some really obscure X-Men characters for characters I'd like to see with some fun or funny abilities. And so we're going to do 2 cards that we'd like to see representation of the characters, whether it's because it's a cool, they would bring something cool to the game, or because we love the characters. Mine are more bringing something cool to the game. And we're also going to do a funny one, something that might be entertaining to add, a meme card, if you will.
Yes.
So you want to start off with your serious one, Dan?
Yes. My serious card is Forget Me Not. He would be a 1-cost, 5-power card. And Forget Me Not in the comics is one of the X-Men, and his ability is that people forget him. They don't know he's there. They just don't see him. They can't remember him. So in the game, if they were to make him a card, I think that they should, after you play him, he'll disappear from the board. So it would look like you never played him, and you'd have to remember that you played him. So, for example, each location you can have 4 cards played. Mm-hmm. So if you were to play Forget Me Not on turn 1, it would be a 1/5, and after the turn he'd disappear. If at the end of the game you leave a spot open, he would come back. However, if you don't, you would lose the power of Forget Me Not.
Would you want him to come back in another location,
No.
or only where you played him?
Only where you played him. You have to remember that you played him.
I like that a lot.
And then you get penalized if you don't remember that you played him.
And I think it's so easy. As the game probably takes, would you say, like
3 minutes?
3 minutes?
That is their selling point. A 3-minute game,
and it is largely really accurate.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time the first turn you're playing him, and the last turn you might forget, and your opponent might forget, legitimately,
yes.
like not even being like sarcastic. So
and
I think that could be a real card that gets people fired up.
And if you sometimes they have little restrictions that you can't play it. So I would say you can't play him after turn 3.
That's not a bad idea.
So,
or if you could, it just might not be worthwhile
yeah.
to play. So that restriction might not even matter.
Yeah, but I think it'd be fun, and they could even add more power too to balance it,
and
make it a 1/7 like Ebony Maw.
That could be kind of nifty. I think a higher power with a restriction might be really good, and then you could use it with this most recently released card War Machine and play it wherever you want without the restriction too. So,
yeah.
Hey, something to think about.
Yeah.
Anything else to add on Forgive Me Not?
No, I think that would be, if you gave me the opportunity, I would add that, and I think that card could be playable.
It seems like something that's in the realm of possibility. I think mine might be a little on the fringe.
Well, let's hear it. Let's hear fringe card.
This is another X-Men. Her name is Dust. Her mutant ability is to essentially be able to turn into like a cloud of dust and kind of like disappear and do a whole bunch of different things with that aspect. My idea for this is that the next card you play, it can't be seen by your opponent. So it's ultimately, my idea would be for it to be made visible and then reveal at the end of the game. A lot of cards, have that after the game ends, something happens. Yeah. This could be something like that. And I feel like something that always makes me sad is Invisible Woman is in the game, one of the Fantastic Four. And her ability is to make the cards you play at that location just not reveal. Mm-hmm. They get this kind of blue glow and they don't flip over, and what they have happens. I wish that it was something where you legitimately could not see it. And I think this kind of connects a little bit to the idea that Dan has, and I think it highlights the need for something like this in the game, where the card is played there and they don't necessarily know where it might be, and it could be ridiculously overpowered, but it also has a lot of relying on what the next card is and what it does. Mm-hmm. So you might tell me that this is too low a cost, and I think it might be wishful thinking, but I have this at 2 cost, 2 power.
Yeah,
it could go up to 3 or 4.
Could, but I have questions I will ask you.
Fire away.
Is there any counter to it?
It'd probably be an unreveal or something, right? So maybe you want to make it a 4 cost, so Cosmo could stop it.
Yeah, I don't
You think it's too overpowered?
I mean, I think it's free 2 points that you can get anywhere.
You can even make it a 2-0. It's the next card that you play is what doesn't show up.
Oh, I misunderstood.
Sorry, I may have not been super clear. But again, to clarify, the next card that you play would be one that is just not visible at all.
Yeah, no, that's a 4-0 for me.
4-0. There we go. 4-0. You heard it here first. I think it would be an interesting way to I think the game has gotten to a place where it's very predictable what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And even in the decks that are super popular, it could make it less predictable.
Yes.
Less stale, if you will.
Yes.
A little ambitious.
A little, but doable. Could work.
Potentially. Do you want to talk about your funny one?
My meme card would be Uncle Ben.
Oh, no.
Anytime he is destroyed, Spider-Man doubles in power.
That is so sad. Oh. Well, way to bring the mood down, Dan.
I think it...
Wait a minute. I think this may have been like a...
Serious?
I'm serious. I'm not lying.
Oh.
Hang on. No, it's not released. I think it was leaked. So I'm pulling up my computer right now. If you look on SnapZone, there is an Uncle Ben card, and his description reads, "When this card is destroyed, add Spider-Man to your hand."
Oh. Well,
clearly you had a wonderful idea, and yours is going to be most likely to happen.
Woohoo.
I like the Spider-Man doubling better than adding Spider-Man to your hand.
Yeah.
Because if I had 10 Spider-Man, it'd be good.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry. I feel bad.
It's okay. I mean, I should have done my research.
No, it's okay. Why would you have Googled Uncle Ben Marvel Snap? There's no reasonable way that should be a card.
That would be pretty funny.
No, I think if it happens, I think.
Or if you destroy Uncle Ben, you get double the power. If your opponent destroys Uncle Ben, your power gets halved.
Yeah, and that could be interesting because he's a one cost. So one cost can be destroyed by other things across the board. Yeah, that's exciting. I like that it could potentially come to fruition, especially because it's your funny one.
What about? Let's hear yours.
My funny one. I'm gonna pull up a picture. Again, something X-Men related. We recently watched this episode in X-Men the Animated Series, and this is the episode that involves Alpha Flight, that being the Canadian Mutant Task Force. And this character is Puck. Puck is a very short and stout little guy, and it made me laugh every time I saw him on the screen. He kind of just screams and throws himself in like a rotating motion, like a little hockey puck, if you will, at the enemy that he's fighting. I thought it was hysterical, and if they could mimic the motion and the sound of that, it would be wonderful. And the ability that I have out here is that he throws himself at your opponent's hand, randomly removing one of their text. They recently have changed Leech, who would just take all the text away from all the cards, to be a little weaker. And I said this could be a 4-cost 3-power card that would like like a hybrid of Spider-Ham and Leash a little bit. Spider-Ham being one that takes a card and like essentially removes its ability by turning it into a pig.
I think that I could see them doing that one.
Why are our funny ones more realistic than our real ones?
Because we thought too much about the real ones.
I think that might be the case, yeah. Either way, I think this was very entertaining.
I'll draw the concept art.
They have a little card generator thing. Not Snap, but like people have made like a thing where you can like put the border and stuff. We can look for the thumbnail or tweet that comes out with this. It'll have these fake cards in it.
We could do I could do Aunt May with the Green Goblin.
All right. Anyway,
sorry I brought down the mood.
If you haven't played Marvel Snap, we certainly would recommend it. We spend enough time talking and thinking about it. But with that, I think it shows that we should probably stick to our day jobs and not be game designers.
I don't know. I think I could do it.
You'd probably be better than me at that.
No. I'd be too down on it.
Oh my god.
Can you?
Yeah, you're a little negative on yourself sometimes.
Well, I meant on like characters. Like if I had to pick a character, I could do like Tony Stark's parents.
Okay. Anyway, with that, really thank you so much for listening. It's been an enjoyable time talking to Dan as always. I'm Joey.
I am Dan.
And thank you so much for listening. Feel free to give us a follow on Twitter at Blue Shadow Pod, at Blue Shadow Podcast on Instagram, and take a look at our Facebook page. We also have episodes of the podcast going to YouTube, so be sure to look at that and subscribe wherever you are listening.
Yes.
And with that, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.